Hey team, we've got a great conversation for you today because today we're talking to Bob Burg, who's the author of The Go-Giver, a little story about a powerful business idea. This book, along with his co-author, John David Mann, they wrote this book, became enormously successful, almost became a little cottage industry for them because there was this book, which did super well. Then they wrote a book called The Go-Giver Sells More for Sales. They wrote another book about leadership, Go-Giver and Leadership, Go-Giver and Influencers. Lots of different books, and they're parable-based books, which are great. It's a very interesting story about a protagonist, Joe, who's a real go-getter, and through some work with kind of a mentor named Pinder, also known as the chairman, he learns to be a go-giver. And the 5 laws of stratospheric success that are shared in the book: the law of value, the law of compensation, the law of influence, law of authenticity, and the law of receptivity. Bob and I chat about all of these and some great backstories as part of the book. I think you're really going to enjoy today's podcast, with one exception. I made a mistake in today's podcast. Bob references that Pinder, the chairman, is actually based on an amazing business, executive, thought leader in Canada. His name was Bob Proctor. I confused Bob Proctor with a guy named Bob Rumble, who was also an amazing business leader in Toronto, who did charitable work, particularly with the deaf. We actually did a little work with them. So my mistake and my apologies, my fault, where I confused these two gentlemen in the podcast. But if you can overlook that, you're going to enjoy today's podcast. And by the way, today's podcast is shorter. It's a 30-minute podcast. We've received some feedback from you that you'd like shorter podcasts. So there'll be a few of these, and let me know what you think. Team, here's Bob Burg, and we're going to talk about The Go-Giver. Hey, Bob, welcome to the Selling Well podcast. It's so great to meet you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. What an honor to be with you. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, pretty excited for today. So when I originally read The Go-Giver, obviously so much of this book is so well suited to a client-first sales executive. It leads itself beautifully into how to sell well. People on this podcast have heard this stuff lots of different times. But of course, this book became a cottage industry for you. So you've done multiple different versions, including one for sales, one for leadership, one for influencing, because it's so enormously popular. But first of all, amazing stuff. But tell us the short story of kind of your professional career that led you to writing this book with your teammate John David Mann originally.
Yeah. So I began as a broadcaster, actually, first sports radio, and then, you too?
No, I can tell with your voice. It's
okay.
Fantastic. It makes all the sense in the world.
Thanks. And then I was in television news for a little bit with a very, very small ABC affiliate in the Midwestern United States. But it wasn't long before I graduated into sales, as I like to say. And I floundered for the first few months because I had had no formal sales training. But fortunately, this is 40 years ago or so ago, I came across a couple of books in the bookstore. One was by Tom Hopkins, one was by Zig Ziglar, two of course, our heroes in the sales space, right? Legends.
Yes.
And really, I took those books home and just began studying them and spending hours and hours and hours on just learning from them. It opened up a whole new world for me. I had no idea there was actually a methodology, a system, if you will, to selling. And, I define a system as simply the process, and I know you talk a lot about processes, the process of predictably achieving a goal based on a logical and specific set of how-to principles, the key being predictability. If it's been proven that by doing A, you'll get the desired results of B, then all you need to do is A and continue to do A, and eventually you'll get the desired results of B. And so that was just totally inspiring to me. From there, I just ate up every book, and back then cassette tape program, went to seminars,
Yes.
about all the personal development, and realized that, really it was a lot about building yourself on the inside. That success is really an inside job. It manifests itself outwardly, sure, but it begins in the head and here in the heart. And, I just loved it. And, eventually years later, worked my way up to sales manager of a company and started also then showing others I guess as the old Seinfeld episode said, yada, 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 years later, here we are talking. this talking. So yeah, it's been a very fun ride, and I just like you, I just love selling, love the concept of it, and so forth.
And well, folks, those few people listening today who haven't read the book, based on the sales figures, I think most of you have, but it's The Go-Giver, a little story about a powerful business idea. And one of the reasons I think it's just such an amazingly popular book is written in the parable type format that made things like, things like The Wealthy Barber enormously successful.
One of my favorite books.
Yeah, David Chilton, just
Awesome.
fantastic. One Minute Manager back in the day with Ken Blanchard. Small, short, but incredibly powerful books. And in this one, the concept of the go-giver comes from our protagonist, Joe, who's a
Right.
real go-getter, sweating at the end of a quarter as he's working for Klassen Hill Trust
Yeah,
Company.
By the way, Klassen Hill, just as a little nugget, Klassen after James Klassen, author of the famous Richest Man in Babylon and
Oh,
Napoleon Hill.
wow.
Klassen Hill.
Oh,
We did
there it
have a
is.
bunch in the different series of the books we did.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah. So little, what do they call them? Not chestnuts, Easter eggs.
Easter egg. But by the way, I love that. I love in our book, by the way, Bob, our first book we've got out there, it's all these old relative names. Relatives. So family members, nicknames of family members, and relative names that I just absolutely love. The Napoleon Hill, I didn't pick that up. What a great Easter egg. But as Joe goes through his journey and, feeling the pressure and wanting to be successful and wanting to sell, he gets an opportunity to meet with the guru Pinder, known as Pinder, the chairman. And he ends up being taught in a very giving way the 5 laws of stratospheric success. And without giving away the whole book, is it okay if we talk about these 5 laws and maybe share a little bit about each?
Yeah. And by the way, are you in Toronto?
I am in Toronto.
Right. Okay. So Pindar is loosely based on Toronto's own Bob Proctor, the late Bob Proctor. And I don't know if you remember Bob, but just a great guy, very abundance oriented, giving, sharing person. And he had this great voice, and he was this handsome, gray haired guy. And so we kind of modeled Pindar off of one of your fellow Torontonians.
Well, here's the amazingly small world, Bob, to connect it for those listening. Today's the first time Bob and I have met. I went to school beside Bob's facility, which was the Center for the Deaf. And as you know, Bob worked with the deaf in a very significant way. He was incredibly giving. And about once or twice a year, I played high-end hockey for that school. Our hockey team would go over and play ball hockey with his group.
Oh,
So we'd go over, and Bob was, of course, such a passionate. He always talked about. I remember a couple of speeches. He talked about being wise and unwise, in terms of his motivational speaking. But what a personality! What a leader, and what a guy. And so we'd literally go right across the way, bring our gear, go into their gym, and play ball hockey with them for a couple of hours. It was insanely fun.
oh, what a great story.
Yeah, what a great man. What
He
a
was.
great man.
Really was.
So there's going to be more Easter eggs that come out on this book. This is fantastic. At some point in time, we'll get to the Easter egg that you were Golden Gloves champion, by the way. Did I see that in my research?
Yeah. Back was
in
it
the day?
now 45 years ago, 50 years, something like that. Yeah, long time ago.
Well, you know what? I'm still going to stay on my best behavior, Bob. Even though we're on a Zoom call, I have a feeling somehow you'd get to me.
No need at this point.
Somehow you'd get to me, and it wouldn't end well for me. So we'll start in with the first of the 5 laws of stratospheric success that Pindar ends up coaching Joe on, and Joe starts to learn through the fable. The first one's the law of value.
Yeah.
Your true worth is determined by how much you give in value, how much more you give in value than you take in payments. How much more you give in value than you take in payments.
Counterintuitive when you first hear it, too, when you think about it, because give more in value than I take in payment. Isn't that a recipe for bankruptcy? So we need to understand the difference between price and value right? Price is a dollar figure. It's a dollar amount. It's finite. It is what it is. Value is the relative worth or desirability of a thing, of something, to the end user or beholder. In other words, what is it about this thing, this product, service, concept, idea, what have you, that brings so much worth or value to another human being that they will willingly exchange their money for it and be glad they did, while you also make a very healthy profit. So a very, very quick example would be the accountant you hire to do your taxes, who charges you, we'll name a round figure, $1,000. That's her fee or her price, $1,000. But through her hard work, her getting to know you and your needs and your business and learning, she's able to save you $5,000 in taxes.
Yes.
She saves you countless hours of time. She provides you and your family with the security and peace of mind of knowing it was done correctly. She gave you well over $5,000 in value in exchange for $1,000 price. So she gave you more in value than she took in payment. You feel great about it. She also made a very healthy fee because it was worth it for her to exchange her time, her energy, her knowledge, her wisdom, her help for that $1,000. So
Yes.
you have more in value than you take in payment, because value and price are not the same thing.
Bob, this is where this is so powerful. You said, hey, I'd feel good as the recipient of her work because, I get a 5X, 10X, 100X return.
Right.
The
Yeah.
truth of it is, as a business professional, she feels better too.
Right
And this
on.
is one thing we see in professional sales today, where I think a lot of the folks new to B2B professional sales, our profession, they don't always understand the impact that they actually going to have on somebody else's business with the product or service they're providing. And as a result of which, they feel like they have imposter syndrome, or they feel like they're taking, instead of understanding there's a real impact. But they have to be able to understand that impact. They need business acumen, they need industry acumen, and then they need to be able to communicate that value.
Wow, you just summed it up perfectly. There's nothing more I could ever even add to that.
Oh boy, thanks for that, Bob. So we'll go to the second one. The five laws of stratospheric success. The law of compensation. Your income's determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve them. How many people you serve and how well you serve them. So fundamental.
Yeah, so where law number 1 says give more in value than you take or receive in payment, law number 2 tells us the more people whose lives you touch with the exceptional value you provide, the more money with which you'll be rewarded. In that part of the book, the Nicole Martin, the CEO, told Joe, the protege, that law of value represents your potential income, but it's not enough to just serve one person, no matter how well you're serving them. Right? The law of compensation is about your actual income, because it's how many lives you impact. And that's the key. And that's why we're such big believers in referral-based business, because you can touch more people's lives through referrals. Why? Because with referred prospects, it's easier to set the appointment. You're going in on borrowed influence. With a referred prospect, price is less of an issue. Again, based on borrowed influence, borrowed trust, you go in with gravitas. So you're able to sell on high value rather than low price. With a referred prospect, it's easier to complete the sale because of borrowed trust, or what we call vicarious experience. No, they've never done business with you personally, but someone who they know, who they like, who they trust has said, this is the person you need to see. They'll take great care of you. Their company's fantastic, the product and service, or and so forth. And then, of course, one of the biggest benefits of working with a referral-based prospect is that they're already of the mindset that that's how you do business, because that's how they met you. So to use Bob Proctor's words, their paradigm, right, is that you meet your prospects through referral. You sell on high value rather than low price. You complete the sale, and then as part of that process, you are referred to others.
So powerful when we get into the referrals, and so underutilized today.
Yeah.
And I forget where. I'll have to pull this stat. We'll put it in the show notes. But when I was doing a workshop with somebody over the course of the last year, I had to do a deeper dive on referrals. And team, we do also want to call out another one of Bob's books, Endless Referrals. Okay, so also very strong expert in this space that you want to go check out, and endless referrals. But one of the things that was interesting was the difference in terms of a sale or referral. If you remind the person you're working with that they actually came in through a referral. So there was a massive sample size in this particular study, which I'll share in the show notes. And for half of them, they reached out to their existing base and said, hey, do you know anybody in a professional way? They were asking for referrals. In another half, they went to them and said, remember, you came to us through a referral. Is there anyone you'd like to show that same consideration to and refer us to them to see if we can help them? There was literally a 20% uptick in the second one, reminding that person they originally came to you that way.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, very, very, very powerful. The third law, the law of influence. Your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. I stumbled. Let's say that again. Your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first.
Yeah, this one not only sounds counterintuitive when you first hear it, it sounds counterproductive. At best, and downright Pollyanna-ish at worst. Place the other person's interests first. But, you think about it, that the greatest leaders that the top influencers, the most consistent, sustainably successful money earners, this is simply how they run their lives and conduct their business. They're always looking out for that other person's interests. Now, let me clarify and qualify that statement if I may. When we say place the other person's interests first, Mark, we don't mean you should be anyone's doormat or a martyr or self-sacrificial in any way. Absolutely not. It's simply that as Joe, the protege, learned from several of the mentors, what we call the golden rule of selling, the golden rule of business, is that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. And there's no faster, more powerful, or more effective way of eliciting those feelings toward you in others than by genuinely moving from that I focus or me focus to that other focus, looking to, as Sam, one of the mentors, advised Joe, make your win all about the other person's win. Now, when people say, well, is that real world? It brings me back to something I used to say when I was on the road speaking. I'm 67 now, so I don't get on airplanes anymore. But when I used to speak at a lot of sales conferences. I know you do. And one of the first things I would say to the audience is, nobody's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet.
Right. Thank you.
They're not going to buy from you because you have a sales goal or you need the money, or even just because you're a really nice person, which I know you are. They're going to buy from you because they believe they will be better off by doing so than by not doing so. So doesn't it really make sense that, that when you can take your focus off you, make it about them? What do they need? What do they want? What do they desire? What challenges are they having that you can help mitigate? What strengths do they maybe have they don't even know about that you can help expand? So when we do that, when we focus on them and make it about them, not about us, we're really creating much more of that, what we call benevolent context for the sale to occur.
Bob, why is it so hard for us to get this? I mean, that concept was made famous originally 100 years ago by Dale Carnegie, where you can make more friends in 2 months by taking an interest in somebody else than you can in 2 years by trying to get them interested in you.
Right.
Why is it that, almost every generation needs to hear this again and again and again?
Mark, I think it just kind of goes against human nature. It's so hard to believe that, that because and by the way, part of that is, we know we have this great product or service. We know it would help them.
Yes.
So we're just going to talk about the product or service, which they don't care about. And how we've been in business for our company 3,000 years, which they don't care about. And how we have right? And no. None of that matters. All right, I love another thought of Dale Carnegie's. Ultimately, people do things for their reasons, not our reasons. So we've got to tie that in to what their reason is. But it does kind of fly in the face of human nature. We're just not thinking that way. And that's why there's people like you out there who's, teaching us that's how you do it. So.
Well, thanks for that. And the other thing I think that's a bit of a challenge, Bob, I think more recently, let's call it the last 10 years, 12 years, in the world of technology, particularly SaaS, sales organizations exploded with investment capital money. That money goes to new sales resources being hired. So they're not always worried about the cost of sales, but they're hiring huge numbers of salespeople back in those days. Those salespeople weren't properly trained. They didn't know to do anything except try and get on a call and either book a demo or pitch at somebody. So because it's easier than taking an authentic interest in somebody else or having the business acumen to understand how to lead that kind of conversation. Mm-hmm. But I think this short-term thinking is really, to a certain extent, poisoned a little bit of the buying community because they're a bit tired now of getting pitched at or being demoed at. I do have to touch on one. It's February 14th, team, when we're recording this podcast today. So it's Valentine's Day. And so just on that final, there's one other thing, putting other people's interest first, that I loved in the book, page 78 of The Go-Giver, where Pinder's explaining why his marriage has lasted so long and it's been wonderful. And the quote is, he says, because Joe's amazed by it. So right. Pinder's been married longer than Joe's been alive. Mm-hmm. I believe there's one reason and only one reason that we've stayed together so long and are as happy together today as we were 48 years ago, more so in fact. That reason is this: I care more about my wife's happiness than I do about my own. All I've ever wanted to do since the day I met her is make her happy, and here's the truly remarkable thing: she seems to want to do the same thing for me. So, hey, we're not going to get on the relationship pedestal today, but there's a nice tip for all of us on a very special day, Valentine's Day. There's a great tip from Pinder we're all going to apply.
Yeah, that was the subplot in the story, right, Joe?
Yeah, there's always different layers of learning. Okay, principle number 4, the law of authenticity. The most valuable gift you have is to offer is yourself. Another tough thing today for salespeople, right? We all... Certainly for me, Bob, when I started, I had a veneer. I wanted to be Mr. Perfect and Mr. Uptight. Behind the scenes, I'm drinking, partying, doing all these crazy things, but I would never show that. I was buttoned up so tight I was going to burst.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the law of authenticity.
Yeah. So, Deborah, who was the mentor in that part of the story, she shared a very important lesson that she had learned. And that is that all the skills in the world, the sales skills, technical skills, people skills, as important as they are, and they are indeed very, very important, they're also all for naught if you don't come at it from your true authentic core. But when you do, when you show up as yourself day after day, week after week, month after month, people not only feel good about you, great about you, they feel comfortable with you, and they feel safe with you. Why? Again, human nature. People want to be able to make sense of their world in a world that often doesn't make sense. They want to understand their world in a world that's often difficult to understand, and they crave consistency in others. And this is in a world that's often very inconsistent. So when you're that person who shows up that same way, it inspires trust. Now, let me share one thought, if I may, that I've noticed this, I think, in the last maybe 15 years since social media has really become even more prolific, that authenticity has almost now become equated with having no boundaries, right? Just say or do or insult or whatever you want because it's authentic. And I think it misses the point. That's sort of, Mark, it's sort of like the person who says, well, I have anger issues and I yell at people a lot. And if I were to act any differently, that wouldn't be authentic of me.
That's right.
Course, that's
right.
baloney. That's malarkey. It simply means this person has an authentic problem. That they need to authentically work on in order to become a better, higher, authentic more effective version of their selves. So we never want people to take authenticity as meaning just no, it's to not grow. It's use that as impetus to become the best, the highest version of yourself. Yeah, I personally define authenticity very simply, and that is it's acting congruently with your values. And
Great.
I think if we do that, that's authentic.
Well, what a great lesson for everybody learning, listening today. Because, sometimes, again, I think that's with a lot of salespeople, particularly new to the industry, they're confused by what we do. Because they're confused by social media, they're confused by entertainment world, modern culture, their view of selling. Oh, the salesperson is that person with the magic tongue that can talk me into anything.
Ugh.
You can't talk anyone into anything. It's impossible. People are repulsed if they feel like they're being manipulated in any way. But this is what we think. Hey, I'm the and some junior folks that we've come across. They're almost proud to say they sold somebody something they didn't need because they're not getting the coaching. So they say, "Oh, you even need it." This, and you kind of go, "That's the exact opposite of what you want to do." And how do you really feel about that? So I love that idea of, bringing your best self, but your true self. And we've got somebody coming up on the show, Bob, a guy named Dr. Nick Morgan. I'm not sure if you know Nick. He's certainly at your level, being an amazing author. But he talks about, he's got a couple of books, Power Cues. One's called Can You Hear Me? But our ability to sense the intent of another human being, there are conscious things we're looking for, but subconsciously, there are literally millions of things we pick up on. And so this is why sometimes you meet somebody and they're saying all the right things, but for some reason, you just don't feel comfortable with them. And then other people you meet at some point in time, particularly face to face, and you just feel there's a connection. Mm-hmm. And it's because subconsciously, you're picking up on all of these cues where their intent is actually on display subconsciously. You can pick up on these things.
Yeah, his teaching sounds fascinating.
You know what? It really is. And without getting into it too much, he had a brain trauma as a young person. And for a couple of months, he couldn't, although he could hear and speak, he couldn't sense or communicate really well with anybody because that center of his brain that was picking up all these subconscious things had been damaged. And then suddenly it was turned on again, and then this became his life's work. Very, very interesting story.
Yeah.
So now we're to the last one, law of receptivity. Mm-hmm. So the key to effective giving is to stay open to receiving. And of course, in the book, Joe has some difficulty with this one. He has a little difficulty with all of them, but the law of receptivity.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, I might be having a tough time with that one these days.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one to say.
I'm not a professional broadcaster, as we've established here. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, so the law of receptivity really is making the point that, you breathe out, you also have to breathe in. It's not one or the other. It's both. You breathe out carbon dioxide, you breathe in oxygen. You breathe out, which is giving. You breathe in, which is receiving. Giving and receiving are not opposite concepts. They're simply two sides of the very same coin, and they work in tandem. Now, the challenge, and Bob Proctor was so wonderful at teaching this, is that the world around us gives us very anti-prosperity messages. Very negative messages when it comes to money, when it comes to business, when it comes to abundance, right? And so, our belief systems, which are a combination of upbringing, environment, schooling, news media, television shows, cultural mores, everything that comes into our, plus the personal experiences along the way that we've had, really can cause us great harm in terms of not allowing ourselves to receive, because so many messages that we get is that, if you're making a lot of money, you must do it on the backs of people or must have done it dishonestly. And how many messages do we get all the time with that? and we certainly see it in television and movies all the time. And so that gets into the unconscious. And so there's this fight between the conscious, who understands on a logical level that, yeah, the more value you provide to the more people, the more money you're going to receive. That's great. But then it's fighting with the unconscious, who's saying, well, if I'm making money, I must have done something wrong or been dishonest or set, right? So that's why I'm a big believer in studying, making a proactive study of prosperity. Yeah, we cover it on a surface level in the Go Giver, sure, but really to go deep, and that is to study the late Bob Proctor. It's to study David Nagel and Sharon Lechter and Ellen Rogan, Lisa Peterson, Randy Gage, Ken Honda. These are people who they write, they speak, they on this whole, and they're wonderful with it. And 99% of what they teach, Mark, is simply how to get past those unconscious anti-prosperity blocks. And so it's really magnificent stuff that they do. So yeah, we need to be able to, understand, sure, focus on the value that you're providing, that you're giving, and then allow yourself to receive.
Think of the joy you feel if you know you have value to contribute. Then all of those sales conversations are enjoyable.
Yeah.
I think, unfortunately, in the world today within B2B sales, 1 in 9 people in the US in a B2B sales job today, experiences a good portion of them are not particularly happy every day because they feel, quote unquote, it's a grind. It's a grind. There's a difference between hard work and a grind.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Hard work is hard work. A grind is painful hard work you don't really want to be doing. That's digging doing the gardening in the backyard for me, frankly. But having a conversation with someone where I know I'm in a position to help them, I'm authentically curious, I want to give, love to receive, I want to give, it's going to make me feel better about what I'm doing every day. And it also gives me a little more professional persistence, with rule number 2, to make sure I'm having enough of these conversations. Yeah. So I really... Team, you've talked about some amazing authors, Bob, today, and you've shared them. I hope everybody gets benefit from that. I'm going to take a note here again and say, you're an amazing author. This is a spectacular book, gang. And of course, I'm not the first to mention this. This is actually a cottage industry, this whole Go Giver. So Go Givers Sell More. It's another book that we read before today. There's Go Givers for leadership, for influencers. These are powerful messages applied in a very entertaining way. So, this is a 2-hour read. Picking up this book and reading this book cannot be a mistake. So this is there's few things in life you can say 100% this is the right thing to do. I'm telling you, folks, this is the right thing for you to do. You'll see on the inside cover, many of our guests have actually provided sparkling testimonials to Bob and John David Mann about the book, whether it's Daniel Pink or Stephen Emmer or Covey. They love this book, and so did I.
Thank you. John David Mann was really, he was really the writer, storyteller. He's just a brilliant guy. And these never would have been anywhere near where they were without his brilliance.
What a great team. Bob, what a great pleasure meeting you today. Thank you so much for joining the Selling Well podcast. How do people find out more about you? What's the best way to learn more or connect in?
Yeah, best way is just to go to Burg, which is BURG.com, and pretty much everything's there.
Burg.com. Team, that'll be in the show notes for today. We'd like to thank our amazing guest, Bob Burg. What a great education. The joy of this podcast, of course, is we get to learn when we're reading these books before these amazing authors join us. And team, I'd just like to thank you for joining today. As you know, the intent of these podcasts is really to help improve the performance and professionalism of B2B sales, because we believe if we can do that, we actually improve the lives of professional salespeople. So thanks for listening today. And please let us know if there's anything we can do to make these podcasts more valuable to you. We're growth-oriented. We love constructive criticism. And you can send your suggestions to me, Mark Cox, markcox@inthefunnel.com. That's my personal email. I check that personally and respond to every suggestion we get. And in the meantime, team, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on the Selling Well podcast.